learning series webinar, and we're so excited to have something very exciting and new for you today. This is Julianne Worm, and I'm calling from New York City, and I'm feel very fortunate to have on the line Nancy Duarte from Duarte Design, and she is extremely well known, and probably one of the things that people know her for is that she did the Inconvenient Truth work and presentation with Al Gore, as well as a number of other amazing TED Talks. And so Nancy is here, and she's going to talk to us about how to transform your story into a visual, how to transform your visual story. And I'm going to just give a little bit of housekeeping. Normally we do polls on the webinar, but there's such rich content today that we're going to go ahead and skip the polls. And Nancy is going to speak from her slide deck, which you'll notice will change in just a moment from the traditional, this red, white, and black to a beautiful one that Nancy has. And at the end, we'll do Q&A. So as the webinar goes along, any questions that you have, go ahead and type them into the question box. I will be monitoring that and writing those down, and then at the end, we'll do a Q&A with Nancy. So Nancy, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be talking to the TED community. I really appreciate the tenacity and passion you guys have for spreading great ideas. Today I want to share with you some content development methodologies. As you begin to build your presentations, it's really important that they hang together in a way that is an idea worth spreading. I want to start a little bit with a personal story. I feel a little bit like this is a picture of me as a small child, and it's so representative of how I felt most of my life, where I've felt kind of split in half, where I had this highly developed kind of analytical side to myself, and also a part of me that really loved to communicate from my heart. And it's really interesting when you have the analytical side and the creative side. I think we're all born with both intact. And what happens is in our businesses, in our work life, as we become more and more educated, that creative side to us is diminished and actually not rewarded in society today. And we wind up being very heavily weighted towards analytical, and that creative side to us diminishes. The same thing happened to me, where I had to actually go to a moment in my childhood where I could actually convince myself that I was a natural-born storyteller. And this is actually a photo of me. It's one of only a handful of photos of myself as a small child. And I'll never forget when this photo was taken, because my mom took the picture, and she was squealed, and she says, "Oh, I have to get the camera. I have to get a picture of this." And I remember I called her a couple years ago because I still had this photo in my little photo archives, and I was like, "Mom, what was so special about this photo?" Because like I said, there's only a few of me, and I'm only barely in this shot. I'm the one with the little green flowered jammies there that are filthy dirty. And she said, "You know what, Nancy?" She said, "I don't know exactly what you were doing, but I knew that if you could do this for the rest of your life, you'd be really happy." Well, apparently, I would find things around the house and arrange them. So technically, this is my very first slideshow, and I've chosen a green towel surface as my background, and I would find little objects from around the house and import them onto my surface and make little slideshows and sit and tell stories to my sister for hours. And I know that even the guys on the phone, there are things from our childhood we can think of where we were natural-born storytellers. Even when you're playing with your Legos or your dolls, there's a dialogue coming out of our mouth, you know, where things happen in the lives of these playthings that we have. But in society and in business, we're not rewarded, and to be really good storytellers isn't rewarded. But I really feel like with the power of TED and the ability that you guys are going to have to spread these ideas, the power of story is very important, because a story is a container of ideas. It's almost like the sugar that helps the medicine go down. And there's some frameworks and methodologies that we need to pull from in storytelling. Because stories create this crazy good human connection where we can connect person to person. We connect face to face. A presentation is the only way that we are really in person, live, having a human interaction with others. So a lot of companies, they track web hits. They track other kinds of metrics like direct mail hits, and there's all kinds of ways to collect metrics. But it is fascinating that presentations are the only form of communication where there's two humans in the room and we're there to talk. But it's really weird what happens when we insert something like PowerPoint in the mix. All of a sudden, this face-to-face human connection is diminished because PowerPoint destroys communication. So it's kind of like when you're in a conversation, your heart is racing, it's beating, you're talking with a friend, you're sitting at a cafe, and you're leaning forward as they tell a story, and your heart kind of races a little bit. We actually have a chemical change that occurs in our body when a story is being told. But then all of a sudden, you put a presentation in between the two people, and there's no heart racing, no excitement, no drama, nothing interesting going on, and suddenly a presentation just flatlines. And that's not a good thing. It's like a psychological thing that happens. It's because presentations are really bad. I think that the best presentations in the world are sitting on the TED server, and there's not that many considering the billions of people that are in the world. So what we need to do is move away from all the really bad presentations that are out there and adopt a new way of communicating. There's crazy phenomenon going on where this was an actual event up in San Francisco at the Moscone Center, and Oracle hosted a big event there, and they draped an entire building in large output graphics and called it a no-slide zone because they didn't want anyone to come into the building and show slides because it destroys communication. So that is one extreme. We can get rid of slides, and there's a lot of TED presenters that present with no slides, and it's actually very, very powerful. But there's also this other extreme where we have a former vice president who caught the eye of Hollywood, won an Academy Award and a Nobel Peace Prize with a presentation. It will be written in the history books that a tipping point occurred in environmental causes because a former vice president ran around the country with a laptop under his arm with a presentation changing the world. Now, you might not have the entire world to change, but what's really cool about being a TED presenter is that you have the potential of changing the entire world. And that is a very, very powerful tool that you have. And the only ones that go viral on TED are the ones that have a specific construct to them. So why are presentations so bad and what has broken? And this is the part, well, all of this hopefully will help you, but this is the spectrum of a presentation. Presentation tools are used to create reports. And a report is exhaustive. It's usually full of facts and figures and data. And there's a lot of scientists and engineers on the phone right now where you have a lot of dense information that would be very easy to just put into report form and present it. The other extreme, there's only real two extremes in writing, and one is on the left side here as report, and the other extreme is story. And this has a dramatic structure to it. And presentations fall right in between these two poles, and it's an explanatory medium. But because we only have one visual communication tool in business and commerce today, predominantly it's PowerPoint, it's used to create reports, and it's used to create a lot of reports. So some of you guys are going to speak about the findings that you found, and you created a report. But what has to happen is you have to realize that you're not supposed to be presenting the report. You're supposed to take your report or your findings, and you're supposed to do a completely different process, a creative process, and turn your findings into a story form for verbal communication, because reports are a printed and a readable communication device, whereas a presentation is an oral communication device, and they're very, very different. So today, through this little workshop, webinar, I'm going to try to move you away from reports and closer towards story, where you're going to include a more dramatic structure to your presentation. Part of the problem is that PowerPoint's own inherent default, if we were to just take this default screen and type in a title, type in bullets, you will create a document. I could fill this screen right here with 125 words. And if I did that, and then you guys were all reading along and I had 40 slides, that would be 16 minutes worth of content you would be reading instead of listening to me. And you can only have one channel going at the same time. So you're either going to listen or you're going to read, but you can't do both. So what we do here at my shop is we actually turn all the default off, and we pretend that we have a blank piece of paper in front of us as a canvas to just start over and not go straight into the default of the document setting in PowerPoint. The most important thing about being a great storyteller is connecting with the audience, and part of that is to persuade. Every presentation, I believe, is persuasive. Even if you're talking about analytical information, especially in this venue, you are trying to persuade people to spread your idea. And everything is coming from a persuasive stance. And the only way to persuade is to connect. Now, if you have a friend that you know well, they're easy to persuade. So persuading a friend is easy. So if you have a lot of overlap with someone like a friend, it's easy to persuade them. My husband and I, he can say one word, and I am literally on the ground laughing. It's just so funny, but that one word has a lot of symbolism between us because we know each other so well. That's why it's really easy to persuade someone you know really, really well, because you're connected to them. But then there's like us. I mean, we're on the phone. I think the shared experience we have is that we all love and are passionate about TED, but I don't know that many of you other than Julianne that I've gotten to know her well. There's less shared experience, less overlap. But when you get into a presentation situation like a TED environment, everybody's coming in from their own context, their own experiences. There's a little tiny place where it all overlaps. And you have to find that place and communicate from that place. And I had a situation recently where I spoke over at Stanford to a bunch of beer executives. Now, I don't like beer. I hate beer. And I knew nothing about it. My husband's a wine taster, and I just really didn't know anything about it. So I had to dig in and do my research. I read articles. I read their annual report. I hosted a beer tasting here so people could talk to me about the nuances of the beer. I mean, I really dove in. I looked at articles. I read all the top blogs. I really wanted, when they walked in the room, I wanted to feel I knew them, because there's something genuine about the tone when you're talking to a friend versus when you're talking to strangers. I even knew what some of them looked like. I knew what they were interested in. And I didn't use all that information in my presentation. I used some of it, but I felt comfortable. I felt like I was talking to friends, and it really made a big difference. And you feel more comfortable sharing stories when you're with friends, and that's very important to do. Because designing a presentation without an audience in mind is like writing a love letter and addressing it to whom it may concern. It's really important that we know who we're talking to, and we know them well, and we can talk to them from a point of intimacy and insight into their lives. And one of the things that understanding them does is it has you come and approach them from a place of humility and authenticity. You can be very authentic with a friend, and yet we're a little more guarded when we don't really know the audience. But people love to watch people be authentic, especially authentic presenters. And yet we take our presentations from this really awkward stance. I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a cocktail party, and there's that kind of creepy guy in the corner who's trying to draw attention to him, talking all about himself, being full of himself. Well, we tend to do this with our presentations too. We'll start off, hey, it's all about me. I've got all these locations. Here's my research. Here's what I've done. Here's my life's work, me, 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 me. And that isn't the way to start out. That isn't a stance of humility. And we need to be full of otherness. We need to be more concerned about the audience and less concerned about us. Because when we show up in a presentation as the presenter, sometimes we feel like, well, I'm here because everyone in the audience is ignorant, and I'm here to enlighten them. And that is a stance of arrogance. Whereas in reality, in this particular scene, you wouldn't be Luke Skywalker. You would be Yoda. The thing that's really cool about a hero and mentor relationship is that the mentor is humble, and the hero needs the mentor. So if you picture your audience as the hero, they're the ones that are the hero of your idea. If you give your idea and you speak it out into the audience, and nobody in the audience picks it up and runs with it, your idea is dead. You may as well not have spoken of it. So in reality, your idea isn't going to become reality unless the audience loves it and runs with it. So the role of a mentor is to come alongside. Mentors in movies, they usually get the hero unstuck, or they have a magical tool or a special gift, or they show the hero something about themselves they didn't know. And this is how you should perceive your relationship with your audience. You're the mentor, and they are the hero, and without their help and without your humility, your idea will not be carried by them and go into a place of victory and reward and your idea being spread. And that's a really powerful concept to get your head around, because one of the things about a mentor is they're always humble, they're not about themselves, and they're really about the success of the hero. Now, this audience has given you, 18 minutes of their life, and they'll never have those 18 minutes back. So when you're done talking to them, they need to feel like it was a magical moment, like it will be a memory of their life that they will never forget. And that's what mentors do. It's a very powerful moment. But you need to make sure you're cloaked in the humility and in the sensitivity of one who is there to give and not one who is there to receive. And a lot of mentors have been on this journey before. They are coming with wisdom. You're coming with wisdom and insight. You're coming from your own context. You're maybe a subject matter expert. And you've been down the journey before, and you're trying to teach them something they didn't know before. You're trying to move them towards something that they never knew needed their help. And change is important. Change is happening all over business. In fact, businesses go through change. Industries go through change. Institutions go through change. They start, they grow, they mature. And if you're not doing things right and changing things up a little bit, eventually they'll decline. Every institution will do that. So you guys have an opportunity for a very public stage to get your idea across. And what will happen is once your idea reaches maturity, it'll have to be reinvented and twisted in a different way, because to keep going and keep the idea viral and to keep it spreading, you have to constantly be changing it and altering it and presenting it in different ways, or it'll start to decline and diminish. So the central idea would be like the thesis of your presentation. We call it a big idea. You need to establish your big idea. And the big idea has two components to it. One of them is your unique point of view, and another is what's at stake. There have been people on the TED stage that are from the same industries, talking about the same topic, but coming at it from two different perspectives. So people are there, and they want to hear your unique perspective on your topic. And they also want to know what's at stake. So if you were going to talk about the Florida wetlands, you wouldn't say, my big idea is the Florida wetlands. Instead, you would say something like, my big idea is that the Florida wetlands are in peril. And if we don't do something, it will cost the Florida economy $700 billion. That's a big idea because there's something at stake. So if you have an idea worth spreading, there's something at stake that's going to happen if that idea doesn't spread, and you need to define that. These concepts in here, the recording will be recorded, but they're not coming out in book form until the end of September. So you might want to have a little piece of paper out and be jotting these notes down. But this is the central theme that you have to do, a unique point of view and what's at stake. Then you have to establish where you want the audience to move from and where you want them to move to. So when the audience walks into the auditorium, they're going to come in with one state of being and doing, and you want them to leave with a new state of being and doing. You want to put these words into the air that make them and force them to make a decision. Do I want to believe that? Do I not want to believe that? Do I want to start doing that? Do I not want to start doing that? And this is called the audience journey. If you do not decide this is who they are when they walk into the room, and this is who I want them to be and what I want them to believe when they leave the room, they won't change. You have to plan this in, and it's a very, very important component of making sure the audience leaves believing and doing what you want them to. They do this with screenplays all the time. If any of you guys are aspiring screenwriters, you might have already sent off your script to George Lucas. And hate to break it to you, but he does not look at your scripts. They hire a bunch of USC film students to preview scripts. And what they do is they'll take the first page of the script, and they'll read who the hero is. And then they take the last page of the script, and they look at who the hero became at the end. It's very similar in presentation to the move from, move to. If that character didn't change much from the first page to the last page, then the journey that the movie took them on wasn't very interesting, and they'll throw out the script. So you need to define who is my hero when they walk in the room and who is my hero when they leave, and everything in between that needs to support. Everything in your presentation has to support who you want them to become when they leave the room. So it's very important. Establish, this is what I think they're coming in believing, and this is what I want them to leave believing. Now, it's really interesting because storytelling has a traditional structure to it. It has a really clear beginning, middle, and end. Freytag, actually, in the 1800s, he actually drew a shape of what a dramatic story structure has. So you can see here that exposition is usually the beginning. The middle has a rising action, climax, and falling action. And then there's a denouement, which is the unraveling or the unwinding or the resolution of the whole thing. So when I saw this, I thought, oh gosh, if a presentation could have a shape, what would it be? And can we visualize it? And so it was really cool because I spent the last year and a half of my life trying to figure this little puzzle out, and I'm just going to tell you all the findings here today. But it was very fascinating to me. Once I actually looked at literature and cinema, and then I knew obviously I think I had 250,000 presentations on my server here, the best strategy and brands in the world, that when I combined those and I came up with the shape I'm about to show you, I actually had like this very emotional moment in my office one Saturday morning, and I cried because I took this shape that I'm about to show you and I overlaid it over Steve Jobs' iPhone launch, 2007, and I overlaid it over Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and it worked. And I cried. It was awesome. It was a great Saturday. So I want to show you what I've found, and it works on every speech that's fantastic. So in the book, I actually analyzed the speeches to this shape, and I did feature a couple of TED Talks in the book. So this is what the beginning of a great presentation looks like. If you have a short presentation to give, 2 or 3 minutes, your presentation should follow just this shape of what the beginning is. So what you need to do is you have to establish what is. What you're doing is you're setting the groundwork. Hey, here's what is. Here's what happened in the past. Here's what's going on. Here's the big problem on the table. And you just establish what is. And a lot of times it's not that rosy, or it's not, utopia. And by establishing what is, you've established what the ordinary world looks like kind of without your idea. And then what you do is you do this really dramatic, but here's what could be. And you're showing your idea in the contrast of what is. And it should be a moment that's like, oh, wow, the audience should be like, oh, my gosh, I see your idea. And what happens is this is similar to what they call an inciting incident in a movie. And what happens is the hero suddenly is dealt something, and they're like, their world goes out of balance. And they're like, wow, you just said something to me, TED presenter, that rocked my world. And now I have to contend with whether I'm going to adopt that idea or reject that idea. And the rest of your presentation needs to support the adoption of the idea. So this is what we call the very first turning point, and it's a call to adventure. You need to focus on that gap and make sure the very first time you propose your idea, there's a big gap between what is and what could be, and they see it, and it needs to be really visible. Well, the interesting thing is this presentation form is what I call it. It's going to move back and forth. It's similar to sailing. Sailing is really cool because when you're sailing against the wind, the ship moves back and forth to a destination. So you can see maybe at the bottom where it says start, that might be your move from, and your destination is your move to. Well, whenever you're asking someone to leave a perspective or leave a comfortable vantage point that they have on an idea, there's going to be a struggle. There'll be resistance. They don't want to get up and move to this new destination, but you just challenge them. You just challenge them with this great big idea that brought their world out of balance, and now they want to go on this journey with you to your new idea. What's interesting is that I liken audience resistance to wind resistance. If you actually capture their resistance and you really think through how they might resist your idea, and you actually embed some of those thoughts into your talk, it's like sailing against the wind. So when you sail against the wind, you set your sails in certain positions. And depending on how you set your sails determines that you can actually go forward against the wind. So it's kind of counterintuitive. But if you set your sails just right, and you move back, and then you set the sails the other direction, you go forth, and then you move the sails the other direction, you go back and forth and back and forth. There's a phenomenal physics phenomenon that makes it so you can actually sail faster than the wind. So if you harness the resistance and the pushback that might happen in the audience, you can actually leverage that to your advantage and get them to the place you want them to be quicker than if you don't. So let's look at the rest of the form in this back and forth motion. After you've established what is, and then you shock them, hopefully, with the imbalance of what could be. Then you go back to, but here's what is. But here's what could be. And then you go back to, here's what is. And then here's what could be. And you're showing your idea in the light of context. It could be alternate perspectives. It could be a problem and a solution. Just alternating between the two keeps people interested. And then you have to end the presentation. If you notice in the form, it ends on a higher plane. And you need to end your presentation stating what the new bliss is. And you can use any sort of poetic device, humor, memorable emotion, whatever it is, to amplify and state this place of utopia. You want to paint a picture of the world with your idea adopted that's so beautiful and so compelling that people are going to want to jump and move to exactly where you are because they know that the world is a better place with your new bliss adopted. And that's how you would end the presentation. But interesting thing about persuasion is that that's awesome. Let's say you did the presentation form perfectly, you got them in, you got what is, and they're leaving the room, woo, 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 all fired up about your idea. It doesn't stop there for the audience. This is the moment the audience has to cross the threshold. It's when they leave your presentation that their work really begins, because you want them to talk about the idea, you want them to spread your idea, you may want them to fund your idea, you may want to be changing an entire culture. So they leave with needing to hold your idea in their heart and become something different and let that seed that you've planted into them bloom. So you do have some maintenance you need to do and reminding that you need to do once the audience leaves the room. That's the cool thing about the TED is that the messages are recorded and people can keep coming back to them. So this is the basic construct, and I want to show you it applied to a 2-minute speech given by Abraham Lincoln. It's the Gettysburg Address. Now this is interesting. The Gettysburg Address was delivered in 2 minutes. It has 278 words. And there's no photos of Mr. Lincoln giving the address because they were so shocked he only spoke for 2 minutes. They usually speak for 2 hours at a eulogy, and he gave it only 2. And so the photographers weren't even done setting up the photo shoot yet, and he was done. Bing. So interesting thing, he wasn't the main speaker that day. A guy named Everett was, and Everett spoke for 2 hours, and he wrote Lincoln a note that next day that said, I wish I could have gotten to the central idea in 2 hours as well as you had done in 2 minutes. So this is a great eulogy, and I'll show you how it follows the presentation form perfectly. So first thing Lincoln does is he sets up what is. He talks about the history. He says, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war, and we have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. So he just established the baseline, why we're here, what happened in the past, and and that we just finished this battle. So that's his what is. And then he says what could be. And this is powerful because they were all there to mourn the loss of their own children, some of these people. So he shocks them. He rocks their world out of balance, and he says, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. And they're like, what? My kid just died here, and you're saying we can't hallow the ground? The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work, which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. And now he's going to paint a picture of the proposed norm, or the new bliss. What is the world going to look like with these ideals adopted? It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. Now here was his call to action, what he was asking the audience to do, that we might here highly resolve that the dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God, here's his new bliss, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. It is amazing that this short 2-minute speech actually falls perfectly within the presentation form. So it's a sound structure that you could use, especially for the introduction of your idea. So once you've figured out the shape of your presentation and how many times you want to go back and forth between what is and what could be, you'll notice that I'm going to sprinkle across this presentation form little colored lines. And what those colored lines represent is texture, emotional texture, and delivery. So what you need to do is, once you've established the structure of your presentation and you have a clear beginning, a clear middle, which is the back and forth, and a really clear end, Overlay into it things that give it emotional appeal. Now, I know that's really hard for some people, especially if you're from a more analytical profession, but adding, even if it's a thin layer like a veneer, it will open up the hearts of the people in the audience to your idea. Now, you have to have a nice balance of it, and you need to use it smart. And the best way to connect people is through story, by telling personal stories, by turning your process that you use to come up with your idea into an adventure story. So you need to sprinkle these stories all throughout, or make people laugh, be self-deprecating, whatever it is, you need to have the right amount sprinkled through. And then the other thing, you can see I added little blue dots to the line, is you need to sprinkle through varying up the delivery style. So instead of it being only one directional, you need to incorporate other things into it. You can incorporate video, you can incorporate a slide, you can incorporate another person sharing the stage, anything to mix it up, because of our fight or flight instincts, we will look and watch when things change up, and people will notice that. So what you're trying to do is lure people. You're trying to lure them visually and lure them auditorially back up to the stage and to focus on you. If their mind wanders, not that it will, but it might, if their mind wanders, you want to put devices in there that will re-lure their mind back and focus on what you're trying to say. Because contrast is important. So we went through structural contrast, where you contrast between what is and what could be. We went through emotional contrast, which is emotional and analytical contrast. And then contrast in delivery, where you mix it up. It's not just oral, but you use other kinds of devices to get them to understand what you're saying. The human brain loves contrast. You know, our whole world is made out of contrast. You have night and day. We have male and female. We have good and bad. We have war and peace. And what happens is when we see contrast, we're interested in that because we are comparing ourselves. Oh, I believe that. I don't believe that. I agree with that. I don't agree with that. I like her hair. I don't like her hair. And we're constantly assessing. So everything you're saying while you're talking, they're assessing. Do I agree? Do I not agree? So even if you plant things in there that you know they're not going to agree with, you can put it out there and acknowledge this is not the popular view, but it'll wake them up and it'll keep them alive during your presentation. So you need to put these pieces in there. It's not like they're going to just magically appear. You open your mouth and all of a sudden it's just completely packed with contrast, because it doesn't work that way. These all have to be planned. So I really want to encourage you guys to captivate the audience. Captivating an audience is really important, and this is one of those little layers of emotional appeal that you could use. One of the ways that we encourage our presenters to captivate an audience is to put in a STAR moment. And this is an acronym we made up, and the STAR moment stands for something they'll always remember. And it's a moment on the stage that everyone's talking about at the water cooler the next day. It's the phrase you say that becomes a rallying cry for your cause. It's something you do that they'll just never forget. So this is something they'll always remember. There's been plenty of them. Jamie Oliver spilled sugar cubes on the stage last year out of a wheelbarrow. That was like, wow, that's a lot of sugar in our milk. And it really made his point. So I'll go over some STAR moments. A STAR moment can happen anywhere in the presentation form. There's no right or wrong place. You put it in a place that's there to create the right kind of emphasis. So it can be placed anywhere, but just make sure you put it in a place that makes the most sense. So Martin Luther King, he was a master of the STAR moments. He absolutely used rhetoric as a STAR moment. He used the phrase, I have a dream, like a rally cry, like a hymn, like stanzas from a spiritual song. And what's interesting about that is that everyone could repeat it, and he built up towards a crescendo where he repeated, I have a dream, over and over and over. Now, what you need to do is you need to have a few phrases in your piece, because you want the press to pick up what you're saying. You want the people that are on Twitter and social media to pick up what you're saying. So you need to craft a really great piece. Now, what happens is a lot of times in business, we write an email and then we send it. We write a blog post and we post it. And sometimes we write a presentation and we present it. And we really need to actually have some well-crafted words, like really do some word crafting. And those will be the moments that get picked up and repeated the next day. I also love a TED Talk that John Doerr from Kleiner Perkins did. And what he did is he used story to bookend his presentation. So he started his presentation with the story of his 13-year-old daughter. They were sitting around the dinner table with some of his friends, and they were talking about the mess that the world is in, the environment. And she looked at him and said, "Dad, you guys got us into this mess. You should get us out." Well, it completely changed how he runs his venture capital firm, or the role he plays in it anyway, and he completely changed what he does. He focused on green investments, and then he talked all about those all through the middle of his speech. And then at the end of the speech, he returned back to that story. So this is using story as a bookend. And he had to brace himself. You see him leaning against a chair here. And he said, "I want to be able to sit across the table from my daughter and tell her I did everything I could that was in my power to do to fix this." It was very moving. I think men crying is a star moment. You don't see it all the time. But it was really, really powerful. You guys are probably familiar with Jill Bolte Taylor, who observed her own brain having a stroke. She'd studied strokes in neuroscience all her life. And as she's talking about what her brain was going through, she actually pulled out a brain complete with the brain stem, and it was all wet and drippy. And so a prop can be a star moment. Steve Jobs is the master of star moments. He'll have something hidden, like he said, "Do you always wonder what that little coin pocket is for on your jeans? Well, here's what it was for," and he pulls out a little iPod device. Or he'll pull MacBook Airs out of inner office envelopes. He's just a great, and that creates a sense of suspense, and the sense of suspense is an emotion. So he's really good at just linking people along emotionally. And then for all you scientific kind of people out there, there is Richard Feynman, who was a physics professor at Caltech down in Southern California. And interestingly, he was asked to be part of the Rogers Commission when they were studying the space shuttle disaster. He knew right away it was the O-rings, but they have to go through their protocol. And he was just getting frustrated, so he took a piece of rubber from the O-rings and clamped it with a clamp and dropped it in his ice water. And it just sat there during the morning. And finally, just at a certain moment when someone else's slide was up, he dinged his little buzzer and said, "I just want to show you this." And he opened up the clamp, and the rubber that's supposed to expand in a millisecond, it actually just uncurled very slowly. It went, and it uncurled at a really slow pace. The cameras, the press, everybody was there taking pictures, and everyone knew right then that that was the problem, but it still took NASA about 8 more months to declare that it was the problem. But it was planned. Like he was freaking out a little bit because the little girl hadn't brought the water, and yet the ice water, and so he was really nervous that his whole thing wasn't going to be able to be shown on national news. So those things are planned, and they actually are very memorable. And what's happening is the reach of our presentations is becoming exponential. And I'm almost done with this. I'm going to close with this. But you guys know the statistics just came out at the end of 2009. 100 million views of TED Talks. That's huge. 500 million minutes. This is huge, the amount of people that are interested in these presentations. But what's also happening is people can re-Twitter. You've got to look at the TED views, but you also need to look at all the other people that are going to blog or Twitter about your talk. And this is a great example I got from a friend of mine named Cliff Atkinson. He wrote The Back Channel. It's a book about what's going on in the Twitterverse while you talk. And so I'll just show you this little sequence of events where this poor presenter, there's an audience revolt happening at the, I don't know how we call it, but it's the health conference. The keynote speaker is getting a lot of negative tweets. I really feel for him. And then this is a big lesson in know your audience. The speaker doesn't know. The speaker doesn't, and don't embarrass yourself. So there's these conversations that are going on while you're talking that can actually amplify how bad your talk is or amplify how amazing it was. So the stakes are higher in a presentation. So here's another Twitter from the same presentation. Just remember how long that first slide was up there. Watching people try to figure out how they can get out, starting to see that, oh my God, I am trapped look on their faces. We need a drinking game for every time he says the words actually and actionable. We need a T-shirt that says, I survived the keynote disaster of '09. And sure enough, they made a T-shirt that said that, and there was orders in the cart before the keynote was over. So you need to be really, really careful. Even to the Twitter CEO himself, it was really sad. The Twitterverse went nuts. He did a really boring presentation. It was all over Twitter. It was all over the news, where the medium itself of Twitter became the CEO of Twitter's demise. Like, people were really rapping on him about how bad his presentation was. Here's some of the Twitter feeds. People were walking out of the keynote. He was really boring. So when he hosted his own developers conference, he knew he needed to hit it out of the park. So he went with really minimalist slides, and I think I'm going to be hosting another one where we'll get into how to use visual communications to create your slides. But he had big ideas, big visuals, not a lot of words on the slide, communicated his messages through metaphor and story, and it was kind of high stakes because it was their first really big developers conference, and I'm just kind of clipping through the slides here. He gave some statistics that were shocking. Those got picked up like mad. And then at the very end, and this is really good to do, he gave the 3 key takeaways, and he did it over Twitter, 1, 2, 3, and he said what the takeaways were. Interestingly, then on the news, sure enough, every single major publication picked up the 3 points. Here's the San Francisco Examiner, 1, 2, 3. So he walked off the stage. He hit send on his phone so that his own little community was seeing what the key takeaways were, and every bit of press picked up that phrase. That would be like everybody picking up Martin Luther's I have a dream phrase. So there was a lot of people that looked at this Twitter feed, and my favorite thing was that someone said, wow, within 10 seconds it's really clear that Ev's energy and stage presence is 10 times better at Chirp than it was at South by Southwest. He put a ton of time. He put a ton of energy. It was 2 and 3 in the morning working really hard on learning his material and delivering it well so it doesn't come across bad. So one of the things I always say is you know you were interesting and you know you held the audience's attention if nobody Twittered. So that's a good thing to me. And that's a benchmark to know if you're interesting, if you had their rapt attention so much that they didn't even pull out their phone. So I want to encourage you guys to deliver really profound experiences and to really be human. One of the things that's missing through most presentations is any sort of emotional appeal. And one of the ways to create emotional appeal is to be you and to be human. And the thing about stories that's so cool is that usually if they're a story about yourself, is you're telling them a journey that you went on where you failed, and then you had to pick yourself up, or a journey that had all these struggles and challenges but you overcame. And it's hard to stand up in front of a zillion people. I mean, there might only be 500 in the room, but 1 million people could watch your TED Talk. But there is something really powerful about connecting with others on a human level by just being you and just being who you are. And that's really, really powerful. And I love to tell this story about my grandmother because we value things based on how they're loved. And my grandma was this very modest. She lived in a tiny house that's probably the size of most of your garages, little tiny thing on an orchard. And she was amazing. She was the rock of the family, and everyone hung out at her house. And when she passed away, my mom called and said, hey, I want you to have something of your grandma's that's valuable. Well, my grandma didn't have anything. She had broken dishes. She had some old clothing. She had some rotted books. She was actually a poet winner. In the state of California, she would win the poetry prize almost every year. So she was just simple and didn't have a lot of stuff. So I said, okay, Mom, you know what I really want is one of Graham's stained teacups. And my mom was just aghast. And she was like, no, I wanted you to pick something of value. And, well, really, I don't know what else in the house was of value, to be honest with you, but I love this teacup. I think if you saw this teacup at a local thrift shop, you wouldn't even pay a dime for it. But for me, it had this enormous value because that's the teacup I would sit with my grandma as she told me stories as we sat around the table. She would go on for hours. We would visit 2-3 hours at a time, and she would tell me story after story. So the teacup itself is valueless. I mean, actually, like human monetary value, but to me it's priceless. And that's what happens with your TED Talk. You're talking about something that might not be of value to the people in the audience. They might not understand it. It might be very complicated. But you need to wrap it in some way that the humans connect around it. So I've got this little teacup with this pretty gold trim, and it's meaningful to me because of the person I connected to around the table with it. And that's the same thing with a TED Talk. It's sitting on the table between you and the audience, and the way you talk about it humanly and the human connection is what makes that thing, your idea, have value. And so you need to pull that out of you and place that value on your idea so that the audience receives it. So I want to close with a story about Martha Graham, who's amazing. I didn't know much about Martha Graham other than she was in the Apple Think Different campaign. until my son, he's a super gifted musician. Actually, he's kind of a prodigy in music, and he went to an arts academy for high school, and he dated a dancer, which I do not recommend you let your sons date dancers, but he did. They broke up. But the cool thing was is he called me one day all squealy happy because his girlfriend had won or was going to be the prima donna ballerina in Martha Graham's dance company. So I'm like, oh, my God, I'm so happy for you, and acted all excited. But I was like, awesome, that's great. And I didn't really understand who she was or why that was so significant. So I went and bought a couple books, rented some DVDs, and I knew within 10 minutes what was significant. When Martha Graham started to dance, she was told you're the wrong shape, and you're ugly, and you're too old. Now, as a woman, I would probably be like, okay, I'm going to go study math. I don't think I would keep dancing. But she did. She had this idea in her that had to get out. And what Martha was so miraculous at is she was the first person to introduce how you feel to dance. So dance before this had been really uptight, very European, very, very set way of 5 positions and certain ways to do things. And she used dance to express how she felt. She wanted this thing inside of her, the ugly, the good, the bad, everything that she felt to be expressed through her dance. So you could look at this picture and be like, why would anyone say she's ugly or the wrong shape? And this is a very elegant, beautiful picture of her. But most of the work she did was kind of ugly. This is a piece called Lamentations. And to lament means to weep. So what she did is she commissioned some really eerie music, and she wrapped herself uptight in some stretchy fabric, and she strained against the fabric and pushed against the fabric as if she was trapped in her own skin, as if she couldn't even escape how she felt. And the first time she performed this was in Brooklyn. And a woman came up to her afterwards and said, crying, and said, you have no idea what you just done for me. She said, I witnessed my 9-year-old son get hit by a truck, and I've never cried about it. And I, for the first time, saw that someone else could feel what I felt, and that it's okay for me to feel this way. And she wept. She'd never cried about it. That's the power that you have with emotion, is to unlock something in someone else that nobody else can. So this is the quote that I'll end with. I love it. It's by Martha Graham herself. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you for all of time, its expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. I encourage you guys to come up with a really solid structure and a story form, and to sprinkle throughout your presentation these connection devices that will get them to actually take in your idea and own it, because that's the only way it would do, is if people can see your idea with their brain and feel your idea with their heart, they will be moved in the direction that you want your idea to go. And I just want to thank you. I'm so excited to watch how the world changes because of all the ideas coming out of these TEDx events. And I want to thank Julianne for being a great hostess with the mostest.
Okay, Nancy, that was so amazing, and I've been wow, that's a lot of content. I've been writing down a bunch of questions, so can I go ahead and just fire away?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, there's a few technical questions that people were writing, and I think those are probably important to front load. So what programs do you use for your infographics and for animation?
We use I would say 95% PowerPoint and Keynote. We draw and use and animate in the tool itself. And there are ways to make it look very Flash-like. So early 2011, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to be coming out with like a ton of these 2-minute videos of how to do some of the techniques that we do. But I would say that we do have to go into Photoshop and Illustrator sometimes to fix things up that can't be done in PowerPoint. But you can do a lot. There's a Bezier tool. There's a lot that you can do in PowerPoint.
And this presentation today was done in what?
This is PowerPoint.
Okay.
And I had to, but obviously my book covers aren't, the photos aren't, those are imported, but everything else was drawn in there.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, those 2-minute videos will be super helpful.
Yeah.
And another question that came up, this is just kind of technical stuff. So we're recording the webinar. When will, you had said something about in September, and there was a question that came up about, what will be available, and what will people need to wait for?
Great question. And the screen that's up right now, it's book number 2. It's called Resonate, and it has all the concepts you saw today plus 300% more. And we actually take the presentation form, the shape, and we do these spark lines where we analyze the greatest speeches of all time, so you could actually see its structure and its form too. So it's actually really, I think it's a great book. So that'll be coming out in the fall.
I can't wait to get my hands on it.
Yeah, so that's what'll be coming out in the fall, and there'll be some of my speaking engagements that are going to be going up on our blog and stuff like that.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. Now let me ask you a couple questions. I really loved the way that you spoke. This webinar will be so useful for people to play for their speakers, the people that they're working with, you know, to come and give talks at their TEDx events. And I kind of wanted to ask you, in terms of if you were going to give advice, or if you were going to, you know, really speak directly to the TEDx organizers and say, what would be your top 3 bits of wisdom, you know, to take forward in working with their speakers, what would you say?
I would say absolutely, absolutely they need to map out what we call the audience journey, which is the big idea, which is their unique point of view and stakes. They have to get their speakers to define that, because if the speakers are trying to do too many things and cover too many topics, that one idea won't be like a clarion call. It's got to be like a call to adventure. And so do the big idea, which is the unique point of view and stakes, and then define the move from, move to. Actually define the audience transformation. In the movies, that's called the character arc. How are the characters that walk into the audience going to be when they come in, and how are they going to change when they leave? And the other thing that's going to take a bit more convincing is to add the emotional appeal, because the contrast of moving between analytical content and emotional, and then back to analytical and back to emotional, in a broad audience, it's important. So a lot of the TED speakers are coming from very specialized fields. They have jargon, they have special things that are said, and special things they know about that field. Well, the TED audience is broad. It's not in their narrow niche field. So they have to strip out some of that jargon, strip out all of the, you know, super scientific nature of it, and they have to lean a little bit, at least a little bit, towards some emotional appeal, or more than half the audience, 3/4 of the audience will just check out through the whole thing, because they'll just be like, oh, I don't get it, I don't care enough. Well, you got to get them to care enough to keep listening. So I would say those are the 3 things: clear big idea, clear audience journey of move from, move to, and talk them into using emotional appeal.
When, as you said that, I, of course, had some, the emotional appeal. I'm just going to zone in right on that one. As you said that, I couldn't help but think of some TED Talks that I loved, you know, and how maybe they were gripping, et cetera, et cetera. Can you maybe tell us a few points that just, you know, a few moments like that come to mind for you, of some of your favorite moments in the TED Talks as examples of kind of getting people to be emotional?
Well, I think
not to put you on the spot.
Yeah. Let me run to TED.com and check it out. No, I think that the ones that and I mean, and it's not because I'm female. I mean, clearly the hits and stuff that are out there, if you look at the ones that are by far the most popular, they tend to be categorized in the inspirational category. Now, a lot of you could say, well, I'm talking about science, and that is not inspirational, and I don't agree with that. If you look at someone like Richard Feynman, who taught physics, he had absolutely these brilliant phrases embedded into every lecture that had amazement and wonderment. He talked about nature like it was this sacred, beautiful thing, and how she moved and how she worked. And, you know, there's ways to build a sense of awe and wonderment and inspiration around your talk. So it's really kind of interesting to me how the really popular ones are the inspirational ones, and I personally believe and am passionate that every TED Talk, whether it's scientific or anything else, could be classified as inspirational if it's built right.
And let me ask you this, when you say build right, just like to maybe get down to some nitty-gritty, how much time when you were working with Al Gore, I mean, how much time should we be telling people to spend, not only the speakers on their talks, but how much coaching time and kind of assembly time, just out of curiosity?
I think the really good process, when we've worked directly with TED presenters, we have them build their deck first and put all their thoughts. In fact, we ask them to build their deck as a document first, so that we can actually really see what they're trying to say. And then that's the baseline we start. Now what we'll do right then is we start to storyboard and reframe it. We reshape it. You got to make sure it has a really clear beginning, middle, and end. And you have to have these transition points between the beginning and middle, and between the middle and end. They're like turning points that trigger the audience to know that you're transitioning to a new section. So I really feel like the good ones take a long time. And like with Mr. Gore, I mean, he presented that about 1,200 times before it was a movie. Like, he was traveling passionately, just delivering it. And so I think that's why, it came across so well. So rehearsing is very important. I know there's people who set their timer and they rehearse, sometimes up to 100 times. So it's up to you, in a way. How badly do you want your idea to spread? Because the output of your presentation is going to be directly proportionate to how much you prepared. So it's like, they could be like, well, I don't want to spend this much time. Well, then, your idea is not going to get out there well. So it really is directly proportionate to how much the presenter prepared. So that's a tough one to answer.
Well, I found that too, the people that, just in the couple TEDx events I've hosted, the people that really dig their heels in and buckle down and have drafts and get involved, their talks go seamlessly. Then when someone shows up the day before and says, oh, I don't have this, but I've heard of it. What am I going to talk about tomorrow? I'm like, oh, no. Well, good thing it's not.
And those are not the ones that will be viewed on, heavily viewed,
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, just kind of as I think about it, in terms of minutes, because obviously all of, the TED Talks are 18 minutes, not all, but the majority. But I know at the TEDx events, people have, use a little bit more varied configuration. Do you think there is a perfect length, or do you have any kind of thoughts on, because 18 minutes is kind of standard, but I know I've seen some great 9-minute talks or 12-minute talks. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. I think it was Woodrow Wilson who said, maybe it was Roosevelt, it's like, if you want me to talk now for an hour, I'm ready now. If you want me to talk for a half hour, I need a week. And if you need me to talk for 10 minutes, I'll need 3 weeks to prepare. Because what happens is you have to get down to the salient core of what it is that is the most important thing. I think that's why the Lincoln example is so great, is because he said more in 2 minutes than this other guy did in 2 hours. But it takes more planning. Like, I think an 18-minute talk is brilliant. 20-minute talks are perfect. To get it down to 10 or 3, it takes a lot more practice, and it's more work, I think. For the ones that do real well, it is. So, yeah.
And someone just put in the question box, oh, Nancy should give a TED Talk, so we'll
get
the TED
Talk. Oh, my God. That was so fantastic.
You have the slide deck totally ready. Well, a couple other kind of specific questions. Someone is asking, what hardware or software can you recommend to handle multiple sources of presentation? I don't know if you can speak to that.
That's a really tough one. So every presenter kind of brings their own media, their own video compression, and all of that stuff. And so I really recommend that you have a Mac and a PC there, or you have it where they're hooking up their own machines. Windows is working hard to try to make it to where we don't have to go to a 15-year-old compression algorithm for it to be able to transfer across machines. But I think that if someone put a lot of video, or they put a lot of energy, and they have their own custom font, especially at a TEDx event, I think that they should just hook up their own machine. At the big TED, they just make sure that the fonts are loaded and everything is tightly tested. But I think you have to bring a Mac and a PC, to be honest with you. If I understand the question.
Yes, and I think that was, and I can say from my TEDx experience, we send out a template, and it's not ideal, piggybacking on what Nancy is saying with such fantastic stuff, but we work with some of our speakers, and then depending on kind of their sophistication, but it's really hard to get everything in one, that's the real challenge if you're talking with video and all that stuff. I mean, and resources, depending on resources. And you know what, just to be, we are going to share this, I just want to double check because the question keeps coming up and I'm not sure I asked or answered it appropriately. We're going to be sharing this webinar, which will have your slide deck recorded, and it will be available online. That's correct?
Yes. Yeah, okay, it's being recorded right now.
Yeah, perfect. We just want to make sure, because people want to know if they can actually share and forward this to their speakers, and we say
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I haven't started to blog any of this material yet, but we're starting to in about a week. As soon as I'm done editing the book and it's off, then we're going to start to spread this like crazy.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And I'm going to just pull up, it's like we love to start and end on time. There's tons of compliments in here, Nancy. People are just so blown away. What a beautiful presentation and just what an awesome, I mean, it's just, they're like my favorite. This is perfect. I mean, everyone is so positive. They would recommend. And someone else just recommended, I'm just going to throw this out here before we wrap up, someone said, I would recommend Screen Monkey, so please contact me if you like. And so if someone contacts me offline, I can go ahead and get you guys all hooked up because I have the name written down. And on that note, Nancy, you are so amazing. This is so beautiful. Seriously, I can't wait to watch it again, and we'll look forward to having another webinar with you will you tell me on the slide deck?
Yeah, we'll do one on how to pull together an effective, the visual display of information for you guys.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy. You've been awesome. It's been great working with you. Have a great day.
Thank you. See you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.